She said, "I'm spending Valentine's Day with someone who appreciates me." I replied, "Perfect, I'll spend it with a lawyer." Her smile disappeared instantly. "My name is Julian Mirell, and I'm a gallery artist in coastal Maine." At 39, I thought I understood the art of deception. After all, I'd spent years creating illusions on canvas. But my wife, Lena, had been painting masterpieces of lies that would make Picasso weep with envy. The morning of February 14th started like any other Tuesday, except I'd already filed dissolution papers at the courthouse. While Lena sipped her coffee and scrolled through her phone, probably texting her Valentine's date, I sat across from her at our kitchen table, watching her perform what I'd come to recognize as her morning routine of calculated innocence. "Julian, you seem tense," she said, not looking up from her screen. Her auburn hair caught the morning light streaming through our brownstone's tall windows. Even now, planning her betrayal, she looked stunning. That's what made this whole situation so perfectly twisted. "Just thinking about Valentine's Day," I replied, spreading marmalade on my toast with deliberate precision. "Seems like everyone's got special plans." That's when she delivered her line about spending the day with someone who appreciates her. The words hung in the air like smoke from a house fire, beautiful and toxic. My response about the lawyer wasn't entirely spontaneous. I'd been rehearsing variations of it for 3 weeks, ever since I'd discovered her burner phone hidden in her art supply box. The phone she used to coordinate her affair with Asher Trevin, her supervisor at the Coastal Maine Community Foundation. Lena's face went through a fascinating transformation. First confusion, then calculation, then something approaching panic. "What lawyer? Julian, what are you talking about?" I reached into my jacket pocket and placed a manila envelope on the table between us. "This lawyer, the one who helped me understand why our marriage certificate from City Hall might not be worth the paper it's printed on." Her coffee cup rattled against the saucer as she set it down. "I don't understand." "Nevada, Lena. Clark County, Nevada. Marriage license issued to Elena Patricia Valdez and Brent Michael Marrow, dated August 15th, 2016. Never dissolved, never annulled. Still active in the state database." The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. Outside, seagulls cried over the harbor, and somewhere in the distance, a car alarm wailed. Normal sounds of a normal morning in a town where nothing was normal anymore. "That's impossible," she whispered, but her voice carried no conviction. "That marriage ended years ago." Funny thing about marriages, Lena. They don't end just because you want them to. They require paperwork, legal procedures, the kind of tedious details you've never been good with. I opened the envelope and spread its contents across the table like dealing cards. Marriage certificates, bank records, employment history, and photographs. Lots of photographs. "This is from last Tuesday," I said, sliding a picture toward her. "The Ocean View Inn, room 237. You and Asher, sharing what looks like a very romantic lunch. The metadata shows you were there for 3 hours." Lena stared at the photo, her face cycling through emotions like a slot machine. "You followed me?" "I didn't have to. Modern technology is amazing. Your phone's location services paint a beautiful picture of your daily routine. Every hotel, every restaurant, every cozy little rendezvous point. It's like having a GPS tracker for adultery." She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "This is insane. You're acting paranoid and controlling." "Paranoid?" I laughed, a sound that surprised me with its bitterness. "Lena, paranoia is when you imagine threats that don't exist. I'm looking at photographs of actual events. That's called evidence. Those pictures could be anything. Asher and I work together. We have meetings. 3-hour meetings in hotel rooms. Very thorough workplace discussions, I'm sure." I pulled out another photograph. "This one's from Friday. Same hotel, different room. Either you two are conducting the most comprehensive nonprofit strategy sessions in Maine's history, or you're having an affair." The morning light had shifted, casting longer shadows across the kitchen. Lena moved to the window, her back to me, shoulders rigid with tension. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly. "Known what exactly? That you're having an affair? About 6 weeks. That you're a bigamist? 3 weeks. That you've been forging my artwork and selling it through your consulting business?" That revelation came courtesy of yesterday's mail. She spun around, eyes wide. "What?" "Gallery authentication services. They contacted me about 12 pieces supposedly created by Julian Mirell, sold through private sales over the past year. Funny thing is, I never created those pieces, but they bear my signature and someone's been collecting payment for them." I reached into the envelope again and produced a series of invoices. $43,000, Lena. That's what you've made selling fake Julian Mirell originals. I have to admit, I'm impressed by the audacity. "Julian, I can explain." "I'm sure you can. You're remarkably creative with explanations, like your story about the adopted child you placed before we met. Very touching tale, really tugged at my heartstrings when you told it." Her face went pale. "How did you—" "Court records, Lena. Amazing what you can access with proper legal channels. Turns out, no adoption ever occurred. No child ever existed. Just another beautiful fiction in the Lena Mirell collection." I gathered the papers back into the envelope, taking my time, letting the weight of revelation settle over the room. The question now is what happens next. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Justice," I said simply. "And maybe a little entertainment. After all, you've been performing for months. Seems only fair I get to enjoy the show." Lena returned to her chair, moving like someone walking through deep water. "The lawyer you mentioned. What did you tell them?" "Everything. Bank records, phone records, employment history under 3 different names, marriage certificates from 3 states. My attorney was quite fascinated by your creative approach to identity management." 3 states? Nevada, obviously, but also a ceremony in Vermont with someone named David Chen in 2019 and another in California with Michael Torres in 2021. You've been busy, Lena, or should I say, Elena, or perhaps you prefer Patricia. She closed her eyes, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "The Nevada marriage," she said finally. "Brent and I, it was complicated." "I'm sure it was. Especially the part where you emptied your joint bank account and disappeared. Brent was quite chatty when my investigator contacted him. He'd assumed you were gone forever. Imagine his surprise to learn you've been living 3 hours away, married to someone else." "You contacted Brent?" "He contacted me, actually. Turns out he's been looking for you. Something about unfinished business and a significant amount of missing money." Lena's phone buzzed against the table. She glanced at it, then looked away quickly, but not before I saw the name on the screen. Asher. "Your Valentine's date?" I asked. "You should probably answer. Wouldn't want to keep him waiting." She ignored the phone. "What happens now?" "Now? Now you get to experience the consequences of your choices. I've scheduled a meeting with Pastor Riley this afternoon. Thought the church community might be interested in learning about your unique approach to marriage vows." "Julian, please." "I've also contacted the board of directors at Coastal Maine Community Foundation. Anonymous tip about potential financial irregularities involving staff members. They're planning a comprehensive audit of all employee activities." Her phone buzzed again. This time, the message preview was visible. "Still on for tonight? Rachel's at her mother's." "Asher's wife is out of town?" I asked. "How convenient. Though I suspect Rachel might be interested in your Valentine's plans. I've prepared a little care package for her. Photos, hotel receipts, credit card statements. The complete romantic timeline." Lena stood again, this time moving toward the door. "I need air. I need to think." "Of course. Take all the time you need. But Lena?" I waited until she turned back. "Don't bother coming home tonight. The locks have been changed, and your belongings are packed. You'll find them on the front porch." You can't just throw me out. Actually, I can. This house is in my name only. Has been since before our invalid marriage ceremony. Another benefit of proper legal research. She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in her expression. The mask of innocence finally slipped completely, revealing something harder underneath. You think you're so clever, she said, but you have no idea what you're dealing with. Enlighten me. This isn't over, Julian, not by a long shot. You're absolutely right, I agreed. This is just the beginning. Happy Valentine's Day, Lena. I hope you and Asher have a wonderful evening. It might be your last one together for quite some time. She left without another word, the front door slamming behind her with enough force to rattle the windows. I sat alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of her deception, and smiled. The art of revenge I was learning required patience, planning, and perfect timing, and I had all three. By noon, I was standing in my downtown gallery, staring at 12 paintings that bore my signature but weren't my work. The afternoon light streaming through the tall windows illuminated every brushstroke, every color choice that screamed fraud to my trained eye. My gallery manager, Patricia Wong, stood beside me with a clipboard full of documentation. She'd been fielding calls all morning from confused collectors and authentication services. The technique is sophisticated, Patricia said, adjusting her glasses. Whoever did this understands your style well enough to fool casual observers. But not experts. Definitely not experts. The brushwork is too deliberate, too careful. Your authentic pieces have a spontaneous quality these lack. Plus, the aging process is artificial. Someone used tea staining and heat treatment to make them appear older. I picked up one of the smaller canvases, a landscape that supposedly represented my early coastal period. The forger had done their homework, mimicking my color palette and composition preferences. But they'd missed the subtle imperfections that made my work authentic. The provenance documentation is interesting too, Patricia continued. All sales went through Lena's consulting business, Coastal Art Advisory Services. Private collectors, no gallery representation, all cash transactions. Convenient. No paper trail, no questions asked. There's more. I called 3 of the buyers this morning. 2 of them mentioned that Lena provided extensive background stories about each piece, personal anecdotes about your creative process, the inspiration behind each painting. Very convincing details. Details she couldn't possibly know, since I never painted these. My phone rang. The caller ID showed Detective Lisa Fox from the Maine State Police. I'd been expecting her call. Julian, this is Detective Fox. We need to talk about the complaint filed against your wife this morning. What complaint? Art fraud, forgery, and wire fraud. Someone provided us with substantial documentation about fake artwork being sold under your name. The complaint was filed anonymously, but the evidence package is quite comprehensive. I glanced at Patricia, who was pretending not to listen while organizing papers with unusual intensity. I'd be happy to cooperate with any investigation. Can you come to the station this afternoon? We need to verify which pieces are authentic and which are forgeries. I'll be there at 2. After hanging up, I turned back to the forged paintings. Each one represented hours of work, careful planning, and intimate knowledge of my artistic style. The level of deception was almost admirable. Patricia, I need you to contact every gallery in New England. Send them high-resolution images of these forgeries, along with authentication details. If Lena's been selling fake Julian Mirell paintings here, she might be doing it elsewhere too. Already started that process. But Julian, there's something else you should know. I looked up from the painting I'd been examining. Patricia's expression was troubled. 3 galleries in Boston reported similar inquiries over the past 6 months, someone claiming to represent you, offering exclusive pieces for private sale. They all declined because they couldn't verify provenance through official channels. Smart galleries. The interesting part is the timeline. These inquiries started 8 months ago, well before the pieces we're looking at were supposedly created. Someone was planning this fraud campaign for quite a while. The implications settled over me like fog rolling in from the harbor. This wasn't opportunistic deception. It was systematic, premeditated, and sophisticated. Lena hadn't stumbled into art fraud. She'd planned it carefully. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at Murphy's Bar at 4 p.m. Come alone. Brent Mirell." Lena's first husband wanted a face-to-face meeting. This day was getting more interesting by the hour. "Patricia, I need to step out for a few hours. Can you handle the police documentation?" "Of course. But Julian, be careful. This situation is getting complicated quickly." She was right, but complicated was exactly what I'd been hoping for. Simple revenge was boring. Complex revenge, with multiple moving parts and unexpected players, was art. Murphy's Bar sat on the waterfront, a weathered building that had survived decades of coastal storms and economic changes. The interior was dim and comfortable, with worn wooden tables and the kind of atmosphere that encouraged honest conversations. Brent Mirell was already waiting when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a clear view of both entrances. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 41, with the kind of lean build that suggested regular exercise and careful attention to health. His handshake was firm, his eyes direct and intelligent. "Julian, thanks for meeting me." Seemed like the least I could do, considering we have so much in common. Brent smiled grimly. "Lena has a way of creating connections between people, doesn't she?" We ordered coffee. Neither of us seemed interested in alcohol for this conversation, and settled into the uncomfortable territory of comparing notes about mutual betrayal. "How long were you married?" I asked. "Legally? We're still married. The ceremony was in Las Vegas, August 2016. She left 6 months later with $87,000 from our joint account and my grandmother's wedding ring." "You never filed for annulment?" "I tried. Lena disappeared completely. No forwarding address, no contact information, no trace of where she'd gone. After 2 years, I assumed she was gone forever. Maybe even—" He paused. "Well, I assumed she wasn't coming back." "But you kept looking?" "Not actively, but I had alerts set up for her name, her social security number, any financial activity. When she applied for a marriage license with you, the system flagged it." I leaned back in the booth, processing this information. "You've known about our marriage for 3 years?" "I've known she was in Maine, married to someone named Julian Mirell. I wasn't sure what to do with that information." "What changed your mind?" Brent reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder similar to the one I'd shown Lena that morning. This changed my mind. The folder contained financial records, employment history, and what appeared to be surveillance photographs. Lena entering various buildings, meeting with different people, carrying packages and briefcases. "I hired a private investigator 6 months ago," Brent explained. "Not to harass her, but to understand what happened to my money and whether she was running similar schemes on other people." "And?" "She's been busy. 3 marriages, multiple identities, systematic financial fraud. The art forgery operation with your work is just the latest iteration." I studied the photographs more carefully. Several showed Lena meeting with a man I recognized as Asher Trevin, but there were others I didn't know. Men and women of various ages, all photographed in what appeared to be business meetings or social encounters. Who are these other people? Potential marks, mostly. Lena has a type: successful, trusting, emotionally vulnerable. She cultivates relationships over months or years, building trust and gathering information. Information for what? Identity theft, financial fraud, blackmail. Whatever opportunity presents itself. Brent turned to a page of financial records. She's opened credit accounts using information from at least 12 different people over the past 3 years. The total fraud amount is approaching $400,000. The scope of Lena's operation was staggering. I'd thought I was dealing with simple adultery and art fraud. Instead, I'd uncovered something resembling organized crime. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because stopping her requires cooperation. She's too smart, too careful to be caught by any single victim. But if we coordinate our efforts, share information, we might be able to build a case that actually sticks. What kind of case? Federal charges, wire fraud, mail fraud, interstate commerce violations, the kind of charges that carry serious prison time and can't be plea bargained away. I thought about Lena's parting words that morning. This isn't over, Julian. Not by a long shot. Maybe she was right. Maybe this was bigger than personal revenge. What do you need from me? Everything you have. Financial records, documentation of the art fraud, evidence of her affair with Asher Trevin. My investigator thinks Asher might be more than just a romantic target. What do you mean? Coastal Maine Community Foundation handles millions of dollars in donations and grants. If Lena has access to those accounts through her relationship with Asher, the potential fraud amount becomes much larger. The implications were staggering. I'd been focused on personal betrayal, while Lena might have been orchestrating something approaching white-collar crime on a massive scale. There's something else, Brent continued. My investigator found evidence that Lena might be planning to disappear again. Bank account activity suggests she's been moving money, possibly preparing for another vanishing act. When? Soon. Maybe within days. If we're going to stop her, we need to move quickly. I looked around Murphy's bar, at the ordinary people having ordinary conversations about ordinary problems. None of them were dealing with bigamous wives running complex fraud operations while planning their next disappearing act. What's the plan? I asked. Brent smiled, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked genuinely pleased. We're going to give Lena exactly what she deserves. But we're going to do it legally, thoroughly, and in a way that ensures she can't hurt anyone else. I'm listening. First, we contact the FBI, Financial Crimes Division. They have resources we don't, and they can coordinate with state and local authorities. And second, we make sure Lena doesn't disappear before they can arrest her. That means monitoring her activities, tracking her movements, and preventing her from accessing the money she's stolen. How do we do that? Very carefully, and with help from people she's never met and doesn't know exist. Brent opened his folder to a section I hadn't seen yet. It contained contact information for what appeared to be a network of investigators, attorneys, and law enforcement officials. You're not the only person Lena has targeted, Julian, and I'm not the only victim who's been looking for her. There are others, and they're all very interested in making sure she faces consequences for her actions. I stared at the list of names and contact information. The scope of Lena's deception was far beyond anything I'd imagined. How many victims are there? We've identified 7 definite cases, with possibly more. The total financial damage is over $600,000, not counting the emotional trauma and ruined relationships. This is bigger than personal revenge. Much bigger. But personal satisfaction is still part of the equation. Lena hurt people deliberately, systematically, and without remorse. She deserves to face every consequence of those choices. I thought about the woman I'd married, the person I'd trusted and loved, and tried to reconcile that memory with the criminal mastermind Brent was describing. When do we start? We already have. My investigator contacted the FBI this morning. They're opening a formal investigation based on the evidence we've provided. And Lena doesn't know? Not yet. But she will soon enough. Federal investigations tend to make themselves known fairly quickly. I finished my coffee and stood to leave. The afternoon had taken on a surreal quality, like walking through a painting where the perspective kept shifting. Brent, why didn't you warn me 3 years ago, when you first found out about our marriage? He considered the question carefully before answering. Because I wasn't sure what kind of person you were. For all I knew, you might have been part of her operation. It took time to verify that you were another victim, not an accomplice. And now? Now I'm certain. Lena chose you for the same reasons she chose me and the others. You're successful, trusting, and emotionally available. the perfect target for her particular type of manipulation. Thanks for the psychological profile. Don't take it personally. Being a good person made you vulnerable to someone like Lena. That's not a character flaw, it's evidence of decent character. As I walked back to my car, I realized that my simple plan for personal revenge had evolved into something much more complex and potentially more satisfying. Lena wasn't just going to face consequences for betraying me. She was going to answer for years of systematic deception and financial crime. The art of revenge, it seemed, was about to become a masterpiece. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of crisp February air that made everything seem sharper and more defined. I dressed carefully for church, navy suit, conservative tie, the image of respectability. Lena would be expecting confrontation, but I planned to deliver something much more devastating, public exposure wrapped in perfect civility. St. Matthew's Episcopal Church had been our spiritual home for 2 years, ever since Lena had decided that active church membership would enhance our social standing. She'd volunteered for every committee, organized fundraising events, and cultivated relationships with the most influential parishioners. Today, that carefully constructed reputation was going to crumble. I arrived early and chose a seat in the front row, directly in Pastor Riley's line of sight. The symbolism wasn't subtle, but subtlety had never been my strength. Other parishioners filtered in, exchanging pleasantries and settling into their usual spots. Everything appeared normal, but I could feel the anticipation building like pressure before a storm. Lena entered 10 minutes before the service began, accompanied by Maggie Doyle, her closest friend in the congregation. Lena had clearly spent extra time on her appearance, perfect makeup, elegant dress, the image of devoted wife and community pillar. She scanned the sanctuary, found me in the front row, and her expression flickered with uncertainty. She'd expected me to stay away, to avoid public confrontation. Instead, I smiled and nodded politely, as if this were any other Sunday morning. Pastor Riley began the service with announcements, including a note that the planned presentation on marriage as ministry had been postponed due to personal matters requiring clarification. Several parishioners glanced toward Lena, who had gone very still in her pew. The morning proceeded through hymns and readings, building toward the sermon. Pastor Riley was a thoughtful man in his 50s, someone who understood the delicate balance between spiritual guidance and community diplomacy. His sermon topic was forgiveness, but his words carried an undercurrent of accountability that felt particularly relevant. True forgiveness, he said, requires honest acknowledgement of harm caused. We cannot heal from wounds that remain hidden, and we cannot rebuild trust on foundations of continued deception. I felt Lena's eyes on me but didn't turn around. Let her wonder what I'd told the pastor, what evidence I'd provided, what consequences were approaching. After the service, parishioners gathered in the fellowship hall for coffee and conversation. This was Lena's natural habitat, social networking disguised as spiritual community. She moved through the room with practiced ease, accepting compliments on her dress and discussing upcoming church events. I positioned myself near the coffee table, close enough to overhear conversations, but far enough away to avoid direct confrontation. The manila envelope in my jacket pocket felt heavy with possibility. "Julian," Maggie Doyle approached with her usual enthusiasm. "How are you holding up? Lena mentioned you two have been going through a difficult time." Did she? I kept my voice neutral. What else did Lena mention? Just that marriage requires constant work and communication. She's been so worried about you. Worried about me? She said you've been acting suspicious and paranoid lately, checking up on her, questioning her activities. She's concerned about your mental state. The audacity was breathtaking. Lena had preemptively painted me as unstable, laying groundwork for whatever story she planned to tell when the truth emerged. "Maggie, has Lena ever mentioned her first marriage?" "First marriage? No, she said you were her first husband." Her only marriage. Interesting. What about the child she placed for adoption? Maggie's expression shifted to confusion. What child? Julian. Lena never mentioned any child. Before I could respond, Pastor Riley approached our conversation. His expression was serious, and he carried a folder that looked familiar. Julian, Maggie, could I speak with you both privately? We followed him to his office, a comfortable space lined with theological books and community photographs. Pastor Riley closed the door and turned to face us. I received some disturbing information yesterday, he began carefully. Documentation that raises serious questions about statements made by members of our congregation. He opened the folder and spread several documents across his desk. Marriage certificates, court records, financial statements, the same evidence I'd compiled but arranged for maximum impact. Maggie leaned forward, studying the papers. I don't understand. What are these? Marriage certificates, Pastor Riley explained. 3 of them issued to the same woman under different names, all overlapping in time. 3 marriages? Maggie's voice rose in pitch. But that's impossible. That's bigamy, I supplied. The word you're looking for is bigamy. Pastor Riley continued his explanation with pastoral gentleness, but the facts were harsh. Lena had lied about her marital history, her identity, her past. The adoption story was fabricated. The art consulting business was a front for fraud. This can't be right, Maggie protested. Lena would never. She's one of our most dedicated volunteers. I'm afraid the documentation is quite clear, Pastor Riley said. I've verified these records through official channels. The marriages are real, the fraud allegations are substantial, and the deception appears to be systematic. Maggie sank into a chair, her face pale with shock. What does this mean for the church, for our community? It means we have difficult conversations ahead, Pastor Riley replied. Trust has been violated, and healing will require time and transparency. What about Lena? Maggie asked. What happens to her? That depends on several factors, I said. Legal consequences, community response, and her willingness to accept responsibility for her actions. Through the office window, I could see the fellowship hall where Lena continued her social performance, unaware that her carefully constructed reputation was dissolving in real time. Pastor, what's the church's position on this situation? I asked. We'll address it directly and honestly. The congregation deserves to know the truth, and Lena deserves an opportunity to respond. But we cannot ignore evidence of systematic deception. When will you make this public? Today. I'll speak with Lena after everyone else has left, then address the congregation next Sunday. Maggie looked stricken. This will destroy her. No, I corrected. Her choices destroyed her. We're just revealing the consequences. As we prepared to leave the office, Pastor Riley handed me a business card. Julian, I want you to know that the church community will support you through this difficult time. You're the victim here, not the perpetrator. Thank you, Pastor. That means more than you know. We returned to the fellowship hall, where the normal rhythm of post-service socializing continued. Lena was holding court near the dessert table, describing her latest volunteer project with animated enthusiasm. She looked so normal, so trustworthy, so completely innocent. Maggie walked directly to Lena and whispered something in her ear. Lena's smile faltered, and she glanced toward Pastor Riley's office, then toward me. The mask of composure slipped for just a moment, revealing something harder and more calculating underneath. I approached their conversation with deliberate casualness. Ladies, how was your morning? Fine, Lena replied tersely. Maggie was just telling me that Pastor Riley wants to speak with me. Really? About what? I'm sure it's nothing important. Probably just scheduling for next month's events. Probably, I agreed, though he did seem quite serious when he mentioned those personal matters requiring clarification. Lena's eyes narrowed slightly. What personal matters? I'm sure he'll explain everything. Pastor Riley is very thorough when it comes to church business. The fellowship hall was beginning to empty as parishioners headed home for Sunday dinner. Soon, only a few volunteers remained, cleaning up coffee cups and folding chairs. Lena couldn't delay the inevitable conversation much longer. "I should go," she said, gathering her purse and coat. "Actually, Mrs. Mirell, could I speak with you before you leave?" Pastor Riley had appeared beside our group, his expression grave but kind. "Of course, Pastor, though I really don't have much time. This won't take long. Please, come to my office." Lena followed Pastor Riley across the fellowship hall, her posture rigid with apprehension. Through the office window, I watched as he opened the folder and began explaining the documentation. Lena's body language shifted from confusion to defensiveness to something approaching panic. The conversation lasted 20 minutes. When Lena emerged from the office, her face was flushed and her hands were trembling. She walked directly past me without acknowledgement and left the church through the side door. Pastor Riley approached me a few minutes later. That was challenging. How did she respond? Denial, followed by anger, followed by threats of legal action against the church. She accused you of harassment and claimed the documentation was fabricated. Did she offer any explanation for the evidence? She said it was all misunderstandings and coincidences. The marriages were mistakes. The adoption story was metaphorical. The art fraud was a business dispute. And you believed her? Pastor Riley smiled sadly. Julian, I've been counseling people for 25 years. I know the difference between honest confusion and calculated deception. Lena's responses were rehearsed, defensive, and completely focused on avoiding responsibility. What happens now? Now we deal with the consequences. The congregation will need to process this information, and Lena will need to decide how she wants to respond to the situation she's created. As I drove home from church, I reflected on the morning's events. The public exposure had been more devastating than I'd hoped. Lena's reputation in the church community was destroyed, her social network was crumbling, and her carefully maintained image of respectability was in ruins. But this was still just the beginning. The FBI investigation was proceeding, Brent Marrow's network of victims was coordinating their response, and Lena's affair with Asher Trevin was about to become public knowledge. The art of revenge required patience, but the masterpiece was finally taking shape. Monday morning brought a phone call that changed everything. Special Agent Sarah Martinez from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division wanted to meet, and her tone suggested this wasn't a casual inquiry. Mr. Mirell, we've received substantial documentation regarding potential federal crimes involving your wife. Can you come to our Portland office this afternoon? What kind of federal crimes? Wire fraud, mail fraud, interstate commerce violations. The preliminary evidence suggests a pattern of systematic financial deception spanning multiple states and victims. I arranged to meet Agent Martinez at 2 o'clock, then spent the morning organizing my documentation. The art fraud evidence, bank records, marriage certificates, and correspondence with Brent Marrow. Everything that painted a picture of Lena's operation. The FBI field office in Portland occupied several floors of a modern downtown building. Agent Martinez was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with the kind of sharp intelligence that suggested she'd seen every type of financial crime imaginable. Mr. Mirell, thank you for coming in. I understand you've been quite thorough in documenting your wife's activities. I'm a detail-oriented person by nature. When I discovered the deception, I wanted to understand the full scope. She led me to a conference room where another agent, David Kim, was arranging documents on a large table. The evidence I'd provided was there, but also materials I didn't recognize, financial records, surveillance photographs, and what appeared to be corporate documents. We've been building a case against Elena Valdez for several months, Agent Martinez explained. Your information provided crucial missing pieces. Elena Valdez? Her legal name, She's used multiple aliases over the years, but Elena Patricia Valdez is the identity on her social security card and birth certificate. Agent Kim opened a thick folder. Mr. Mirell, your wife is part of what we call a romance fraud network. She targets successful individuals, builds relationships over time, then exploits those relationships for financial gain. How many victims are there? We've identified 12 confirmed cases over the past 5 years. The total financial damage exceeds $800,000. The scope was staggering. I'd thought I was dealing with personal betrayal, but Elena, I was having trouble thinking of her as Lena anymore, was apparently a professional criminal. The art fraud operation using your work is particularly sophisticated, Agent Martinez continued. She researched your style extensively, hired skilled forgers, and created false provenance documentation. The total fraud amount from fake Julian Mirell paintings is $73,000. $73,000? I thought it was $43,000. We found additional sales through online platforms and private dealers. Your wife was quite entrepreneurial. Agent Kim spread out a timeline chart showing Elena's activities over the past 3 years. Marriage to me, simultaneous relationships with other targets, systematic financial fraud, and what appeared to be preparation for another disappearing act. Mr. Mirell, we believe your wife is planning to leave the area within the next few days. Bank records show large cash withdrawals, and she's been liquidating assets through various channels. What kind of assets? Jewelry, artwork, investment accounts opened under false names. She's converting everything to portable wealth. How much money are we talking about? Approximately $200,000, based on our analysis. Enough to fund a comfortable disappearance and establish a new identity elsewhere. The agents explained that Elena's operation was more sophisticated than simple romance fraud. She maintained multiple identities, cultivated relationships in different geographic areas, and rotated between targets to avoid detection. The marriage to Brent Marrow in Nevada was her first documented case, Agent Martinez said. She perfected her techniques over time, becoming more careful and more ambitious with each subsequent victim. What about Asher Trevin, her supervisor at the nonprofit? Agent Kim smiled grimly. That relationship is particularly interesting. Mr. Trevin has access to significant financial resources through his position, and we believe Elena may have been planning a major theft from the foundation's accounts. Planning? The relationship appears to have been strategic from the beginning. Elena researched Trevin extensively before applying for her position at the foundation. Her qualifications were fabricated, her references were fake, but her presentation was convincing enough to get her hired. So the entire job was part of the fraud? We believe so. Elena doesn't take positions randomly. Every choice serves a purpose in her larger operation. Agent Martinez opened another folder containing surveillance photographs. Elena meeting with various people, entering banks, visiting safety deposit box facilities, conducting what appeared to be business transactions. Mr. Mirell, we need your cooperation in preventing Elena from disappearing before we can arrest her. What kind of cooperation? Continue your normal routine, but report any contact from her immediately. Don't confront her directly or let her know about this investigation. What if she tries to come home? She won't. Our surveillance indicates she's staying at a hotel downtown, probably preparing for departure. Agent Kim leaned forward. There's something else you should know. Elena's pattern suggests she may attempt to discredit you before she leaves. How? False police reports, fabricated evidence of domestic violence, claims that you're mentally unstable. She's used these tactics before to deflect attention from her own crimes. The implications were chilling. Elena wasn't just planning to disappear, she was planning to destroy my reputation in the process. How do I protect myself? Document everything, avoid private contact with her, and report any harassment immediately. We'll coordinate with local law enforcement to ensure your safety. Agent Martinez handed me her business card. Mr. Mirell, This investigation is moving quickly. We expect to make arrests within the next 72 hours. Arrests? Plural? Lena had accomplices. The art forgery operation required skilled assistance, and some of her financial crimes involved co-conspirators. As I prepared to leave, Agent Kim asked one final question. Mr. Mirell, looking back, were there warning signs you missed? I thought about the question carefully. She was too perfect, too interested in my work, too supportive of my career, too eager to integrate into my life. I interpreted that as love, but it was probably reconnaissance. That's a common pattern with these cases. The victims are chosen specifically because they're trusting and successful. Your positive qualities made you vulnerable. Driving home from the FBI meeting, I realized that my personal revenge plot had evolved into something much larger. Lena wasn't just going to face consequences for betraying me. She was going to answer for years of systematic criminal activity. But the agent's warning about Lena attempting to discredit me was troubling. If she was planning to destroy my reputation before disappearing, I needed to be prepared for whatever she might try. That evening, I received a text message from an unknown number. Julian, we need to talk. Meet me at the marina tomorrow at 8 p.m. Come alone and bring the documentation you've been collecting. It's time to end this properly. Fait. Lena wanted a final confrontation. The question was whether this was an attempt at reconciliation, a trap, or something else entirely. I forwarded the message to Agent Martinez and waited for her response. The FBI's investigation was proceeding, but Lena was still free and apparently planning something dramatic. The art of revenge was approaching its climax, but I wasn't sure who would emerge victorious. Tuesday evening arrived with fog rolling in from the harbor, turning the marina into something from a noir film. I arrived early, positioned myself with a clear view of all approaches, and waited for Lena to make her move. Agent Martinez had insisted on surveillance backup, so I knew federal agents were watching from concealed positions. But Lena had requested this meeting for a reason, and I suspected she had her own plans for how it would unfold. She appeared at exactly 8 o'clock, walking down the dock with confident strides despite the uncertain footing. She dressed carefully, dark coat, professional appearance, the image of someone conducting legitimate business. But her posture carried tension that suggested she knew this was her final performance. Julian. She stopped 10 feet away, maintaining distance between us. Thank you for coming. Lena, or do you prefer Lena? I'm having trouble keeping track of your preferred identity. My name is Elena Patricia Valdez. It always has been. Except when you were Mrs. Brent Marrow, or Mrs. David Chen, or Mrs. Michael Torres. Her expression didn't change, but I caught a slight tightening around her eyes. You've been thorough in your research. The FBI has been thorough. I've just been cooperative. That got a reaction. Elena's composure slipped for a moment, revealing something harder underneath. The FBI? Financial Crimes Division. They're very interested in your business activities over the past 5 years. Something about wire fraud and interstate commerce violations. You contacted federal law enforcement? Actually, they contacted me. Apparently, you have quite a reputation in certain circles. Elena began pacing along the dock, her movements controlled but agitated. The fog was thickening, reducing visibility and creating an appropriately dramatic atmosphere for our final confrontation. Julian, you don't understand the situation you've created. Enlighten me. There are people involved in this who don't appreciate federal attention, people who have invested significant resources in maintaining privacy. Are you threatening me? I'm warning you. The art fraud, the marriage issues, the financial irregularities, those are minor problems compared to what happens when certain business relationships are exposed. I studied her face, looking for tells that might indicate deception or genuine fear. Elena had always been skilled at emotional manipulation, but something in her current demeanor suggested real concern. What business relationships? The kind that prefer to remain invisible, the kind that solve problems permanently when necessary. Elena, if you're involved with dangerous people, that's your choice. I'm not going to protect you from the consequences. I'm not asking for protection, I'm offering you a way out. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a manila envelope similar to the ones I'd been using. This contains everything you need to disappear cleanly. New identity documents, offshore bank account information, transportation arrangements. You want me to run away with you? I want you to survive what's coming. The FBI investigation is going to expose more than just my activities. There are connections, financial relationships, people who won't hesitate to eliminate witnesses. The offer was surreal. Elena was proposing that we flee together, abandoning everything I'd built in Maine to start over somewhere else. What about Asher Trevin? Asher was a means to an end. Access to Foundation resources, nothing more. And Brent Marrow, David Chen, Michael Torres? Business relationships that served their purpose. And me? What was I? Elena stopped pacing and looked directly at me. You were supposed to be the final score. Successful artist, valuable connections, substantial assets, but somewhere along the way, it became more complicated. Complicated how? I started to care about you. Not enough to abandon my plans, but enough to offer you a way out now. The confession was delivered with Elena's characteristic blend of honesty and manipulation. Even now, facing federal charges and the collapse of her operation, she was trying to control the narrative. Elena, I'm not running away. I'm staying here to face whatever consequences emerge from your choices. Then you're going to get hurt, possibly worse than hurt. That's a risk I'm willing to take. She opened the envelope and showed me its contents. Passport, driver's license, credit cards, all bearing my photograph but a different name. The documentation looked professionally produced. Julian, this identity is clean. No connections to your current life, no way for anyone to trace you. We could be in South America by tomorrow night. And then what? Spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders? Better than spending the rest of your life in a grave. The threat was more explicit now, but I still wasn't sure whether Elena was genuinely concerned for my safety or attempting one final manipulation. Who are these dangerous people you keep mentioning? Money launderers primarily. People who use art sales and nonprofit donations to clean profits from various illegal activities. And you've been facilitating this? I've been providing services. The art forgery operation, the nonprofit access through Asher, the identity management systems. All useful for people who need to move money without attracting attention. The scope of Elena's criminal involvement was far beyond anything I'd imagined. She wasn't just running romance fraud, she was part of a larger money laundering network. Elena, if you cooperate with the FBI investigation, you might be able to work out a deal. There are no deals with the kind of people I'm talking about. Cooperation means elimination. Then you should have thought about that before getting involved with them. I didn't have a choice. The money laundering contracts were the only way to fund my operation at the scale I needed. You always have choices. You chose deception, fraud, and criminal association. Now you're facing the consequences. Elena returned the documents to the envelope and stepped closer. Julian, last chance. Come with me now, or deal with what happens when this investigation exposes the wrong people. I'm staying. Then I'm sorry for what's going to happen to you. She turned to walk away, but I called after her. Elena, one more question. She paused without turning around. Did you ever actually care about me, or was it all performance? Does it matter now? It matters to me. She turned back, and for a moment her expression was almost vulnerable. I cared enough to offer you a way out. That's more than I've done for anyone else. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're going to get. Elena walked back down the dock and disappeared into the fog. I remained at the marina for another 20 minutes, but she didn't return. Agent Martinez emerged from her surveillance position shortly after Elena left. Did you get all that? Every word. She's definitely involved with money laundering operations, and she seems genuinely concerned about retaliation. What's your assessment of the threat level? Hard to say. Elena's skilled at manipulation, but her fear seemed authentic. We'll increase security around you until we make the arrests. Should be within the next 24 hours. As I drove home through the foggy streets, I reflected on Elena's final offer. The chance to disappear, to start over somewhere else, to avoid whatever consequences might emerge from her criminal associations. But running away would mean abandoning everything I'd built, everyone I cared about, and the chance to see justice served. Elena had made her choices, and now she would face the consequences. The art of revenge was nearly complete, but the final brushstrokes would be applied by federal agents, not by me. Wednesday morning brought the sound of sirens and the sight of FBI vehicles surrounding the downtown hotel where Elena had been staying. Agent Martinez called to inform me that the arrests were underway, but Elena wasn't in her room. She's gone, Agent Martinez said. Checked out sometime after midnight, paid in cash, left no forwarding information. What about her accomplices? We arrested 3 people involved in the money laundering operation, including the forger who created your fake artwork. But Elena managed to slip away. The news was frustrating but not entirely surprising. Elena had survived by staying one step ahead of consequences, and she'd apparently managed to do it again. Agent Martinez, what happens now? We continue the investigation. Elena left behind evidence, financial records, communication logs. Even if she's disappeared temporarily, we'll eventually track her down. And the charges? Federal warrants have been issued for wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. When we find her, she'll face serious prison time. I spent the morning at my gallery, trying to return to normal routine while processing the events of the past week. The forged paintings had been removed as evidence, leaving empty spaces on the walls that felt symbolic of the gaps Elena had left in my life. Patricia Wong arrived with coffee and the latest updates from the art world. News of the forgery scandal had spread quickly through gallery networks, but the response had been supportive rather than damaging to my reputation. Julian, I've had calls from collectors all morning. People want to verify the authenticity of pieces they own, but they're also expressing support for how you've handled this situation. That's reassuring. There's something else. A reporter from the Portland Press-Herald wants to interview you about the case. Apparently, the FBI arrests made the morning news. I wasn't sure I was ready for media attention, but public awareness might help prevent Elena from targeting other victims. Set up the interview for this afternoon. The story needs to be told. At noon, Brent Marrow called with updates from his network of Elena's victims. Julian, the FBI arrests have been a catalyst. 3 more victims have come forward with evidence, and there's talk of a class action lawsuit for civil damages. How much money are we talking about? Over $1 million in confirmed losses, possibly more. Elena was operating on a scale none of us fully understood. Any word on her current location? Nothing confirmed, but my investigator thinks she might have fled to Mexico. She has connections there from previous operations. The afternoon interview with the Portland Press-Herald went better than expected. The reporter, Jennifer Walsh, was thorough but fair, focusing on the broader implications of romance fraud rather than sensationalizing personal details. Mr. Mirell, what would you want other potential victims to know about this type of crime? Trust your instincts. If someone seems too perfect, too interested in your financial situation, or too eager to integrate into your life quickly, ask questions. Verify their background independently. What's been the most difficult part of this experience? Realizing that someone I loved and trusted was systematically deceiving me for years. The betrayal is more painful than the financial losses. Do you think Elena Valdez will be caught? Eventually, yes. She's left too much evidence and hurt too many people to remain hidden forever. That evening, I attended a community meeting at St. Matthew's Church where Pastor Riley addressed Elena's deception and its impact on the congregation. The response was supportive, with several parishioners expressing appreciation for my honesty in exposing the fraud. "Julian, you did the right thing," said Margaret Foster, an elderly woman who'd been particularly fond of Elena. "It hurts to learn we were deceived, but it would hurt more to let her continue harming people." As the meeting concluded, I reflected on the past week's events. Elena had disappeared, but her criminal network was exposed, her victims were coordinating their response, and law enforcement was actively pursuing her. The personal revenge I'd originally planned had evolved into something much larger, a comprehensive effort to ensure Elena faced consequences for years of systematic deception and criminal activity. Thursday morning brought a final surprise. Agent Martinez called with news that Elena had been arrested at the Mexican border, attempting to cross with false identification documents. "She's in federal custody now," Agent Martinez said. "The arraignment is scheduled for next week." "What are the charges?" 16 federal counts, including wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. If convicted on all counts, she's looking at 20 to 30 years in federal prison. Will she accept a plea deal? Her attorney is exploring options, but the evidence is overwhelming. The money laundering charges alone carry mandatory minimum sentences. I drove to the courthouse for Elena's arraignment, not because I needed to be there, but because I wanted to see the final act of this drama play out. Elena appeared in federal court wearing an orange jumpsuit and restraints, a stark contrast to the elegant woman who'd shared my breakfast table just a week earlier. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the reality of her situation. The federal prosecutor read the charges systematically, each count representing years of Elena's criminal activity: wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, identity theft. The list seemed endless. Elena's attorney entered a plea of not guilty, but his demeanor suggested he understood the weakness of their position. The evidence was comprehensive, the victim testimony was compelling, and the federal government had unlimited resources to pursue conviction. As Elena was led away in restraints, she turned and looked directly at me. Her expression was unreadable, not angry, not pleading, just empty. The woman who'd built her life on manipulation and deception had finally run out of performance. Outside the courthouse, I encountered several of Elena's other victims who'd attended the arraignment. Brent Marrow was there, along with 2 people I didn't recognize, but who'd apparently suffered similar losses. "Justice?" Brent said simply. "Finally." "It's not over yet," I replied. "She still has to be convicted." "With this evidence?" "That's a formality." As I drove home, I realized that my quest for revenge had achieved something I hadn't expected: a sense of closure that went beyond personal satisfaction. Elena would face consequences not just for betraying me, but for years of systematic harm to multiple victims. The art of revenge, it turned out, was most effective when it served justice rather than just personal vendetta. 6 months later, Elena Patricia Valdez pleaded guilty to 14 federal charges and was sentenced to 28 years in federal prison. The restitution order required her to pay back over $800,000 to her victims, though most of that money was never recovered. I kept one of the forged paintings as a reminder, not of Elena's betrayal, but of the importance of authenticity in all aspects of life. The empty spaces on my gallery walls were eventually filled with new work, honest work, created without deception or manipulation. The story made national news as an example of sophisticated romance fraud, and I received calls from other victims of similar crimes. Some wanted advice. Others just wanted someone who understood their experience. Elena's Valentine's Day declaration, that she was spending the day with someone who appreciated her, had been technically accurate. She'd spent it with federal agents who appreciated her criminal skills enough to build a comprehensive case against her. My response about spending it with a lawyer had also proven prophetic, though not in the way either of us had expected. The art of revenge, I learned, was most satisfying when it served a purpose larger than personal vindication. Elena's victims received justice, her criminal network was exposed, and future targets were warned about her methods. Sometimes the best revenge is simply ensuring that consequences finally catch up with someone who spent years avoiding them. And sometimes the most beautiful art emerges from the ashes of deception.